Hi, Sherry.
Hi there, Dan. I'm off
We'll get
camera.
started.
I'm
sorry.
yeah.
There you go.
A little different setting.
Looking forward to this.
Wife,
Right to have
right
you.
on the screen. Golly, what a treat.
Cool.
Can't chew gum and drink coffee at the same time.
You can, but.
Well, it would probably be.
What time is this technically supposed to start?
Usually about like 11, I believe,
I wasn't sure if it was quarter till or at 11.
when the room gets kind of full, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. That's a good.
How's Bob? I'm doing it. Good. Yep. I'm glad to be home. I'll
Were you
tell you
gone?
another
Yeah.
lie.
Were you gone for a while?
Just double checking.
Yeah, Dan do.
Oh, got back home Thursday.
Where did you go?
Place called East Stockton. Northeast Opener. It's on the west, most people go to like Moss's Pond, Port of Fire Island and stuff like that. We go a little further south.
Oh, okay. Is that something you do every year?
We've been doing that for a while. It's 15 years now. Go down there for a week.
Do you have a timeshare down there then?
No, we have a hotel we really like. Get a lot of walking.
How can you just do that? Oh, yeah, no, it's a very nice chair. Oh, you do? These are good, got good back supports on them.
You got that table?
Yes, we do.
Weird to see it here.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly like ours.
30 years old.
Okay. Save my seat, please. I didn't know which area you wanted me to buy. Not even a little bit. Just a week. Just a week. You can wait to be gone.
That's come on all of a sudden, yeah, and you think maybe.
I was in Tucson once.
Just once.
I remember when I was there. I remember driving up Alpine. But for 6 climate zones.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd stay for the whole.
Yeah, what's different in the West is that because of the presence of mountains, always in the same direction. You know that that's more than Santa. Whereas in the Midwest, there's none of that sense of direction. If you don't have a compass, you really don't know which way is north. Whereas out west, there's always a feeling of the mountains, the oceans, there's a geographic centerless to it. Which I learned to appreciate. And it's also when you pick direction. In the West, they say turn north. Whereas here they would say turn left. Then they say turn north.
The lowest one I grew up.
Now that I'm in my almost 70s,
My father.
our chairs could be very good.
My father was like, I mean, at least Chicago, there's a way.
Tucson is such a grid road system that about every 10 miles, the roads take a slight slope. last year more followers. You can't lay out a grid on the road without making a little bit of, and so there's a place in Tucson, all the roads go about 100 yards south from where they're going east. And it's because they were laid out on the maps in order to keep the grid lines. They talk about every 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, I was, I already did with my, but I mean, I've been
Not even suggested.
He's highly social.
Surprised. Dan's this prayer.
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So you can see the room's configured a little differently, and basically, you know, I thought it would be better for the meditation part. Like I can actually have anybody on Zoom see and you see without tables in the way. So it kind of helps facilitate that part. But so anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Kamie Buddemeier, and I'm married to Dan Crump because everybody knows Dan Crump. If you don't know me, I'm related to that. But anyway, so my topic for today is Introduction to Zen, and then also some basic meditation instruction. And my journey, how I got into meditation was actually about 20 years ago. I took a class from Susan Mickle. Some of you know Susan. She used to be a member of our church, and she was a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, but she taught some just basic, simple mindfulness meditation. So I consider her my first teacher, really. And so I had my personal meditation practice at home, and from there, it kind of sparked interest in reading more about spirituality. You know, like where does this come from, and what's the background of meditation, and what are some other ways of thinking about spirituality. So I just got kind of curious, and I did a lot of reading, and a lot of different types of traditions. There was like, I don't know, Zen and Tibetan, and then people I don't even know exactly what their tradition is, Krishnamurti and Aurobindo, and people have probably heard of maybe Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh. And anyway, so I was, reading and, learning about, or I kept hearing about enlightenment and, a certain kind of experience that people have. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And in 2006, so about more than 18 years ago, I was listening to a tape, or it wasn't a tape, well, CD, back in the day of CDs, in my car, driving to outreach in Stevens Point. So I'm a retired cardiologist, so I used to do some consults over in Stevens Point. And so I was listening to this guy interview a Zen master named Genpo Roshi, who actually is now my teacher, but at the time I'd never heard of him. And he was going to talk about or facilitate this big mind process and, asking to speak to different aspects of the self, including the enlightened aspect. And I thought, I don't know, this sounds weird. I don't think I'm going to like it, but I'll listen for a few minutes, So I'm driving along, and then he facilitated the enlightened perspective, and boom, I made the shift right there. There I am in the territory. So I went from the proverbial map to the territory. I'd been reading about it, reading, and here it was. And I was like, oh, okay. Alrighty then. So who's this guy, this Zen master Genpo Roshi? So I got home when I came back, and I looked him up, and he had a workshop coming up on this big mind process. So I thought, okay. It was a couple months later. I took the workshop thinking, okay, this will just be a one-off. I'll go there, take this, and that'll be it. I'll get a little more information or, see what he has to offer. And much to my shock, the second day, I walked up to this guy and asked him to be my teacher. And I'm like, who's doing this? I mean, it wasn't my small everyday self. It was coming from somewhere deeper, because then I immediately went back to my room and called Dan and said, I don't know what just happened, but I asked this guy to be my teacher. He said yes. And I'm like, I wasn't even looking for a teacher. I don't even know what a teacher is. I didn't even know what that meant. And anyway, sometime down the road, I had heard the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I guess that was the case at the time, but I'd never heard that. Anyway, the next day I go up to the guy and I said, does this make me a Zen student? He goes, no, we'll see. But let's just see. So anyway, I started doing more retreats and workshops, and I realized that big mind process that I'm going to be facilitating next year is actually more a tool of Zen, and Zen is the underlying wisdom tradition from which that came. So anyway, so I ended up staying as a Zen student, and I've been formally training and studying, and I was ordained as Zen monk in 2008. So that's kind of my story, like how I got into things. And so now I felt called to try and talk about that which can't be talked about. So Zen is the tradition that's experiential. It's beyond words and letters. It's actually about an experience. So anything you say about it, isn't it, but you do the best you can. And I thought maybe the best thing for me to do would be to talk about the Buddha's experience, the original. So the Buddha is actually it just means to be awakened, but it's not the Buddha isn't considered a god or a deity or a prophet. In fact, the Buddha was born just a regular human being. Siddhartha Gautama was his name. He was born in India 2,500 years ago in an area that I guess it's now Nepal, but I think back then it was still India. And he was born a regular person in that he was born just a guy, a human being, but he wasn't hardly regular because he was a prince. His parents were a king and queen. So at his birth, it was actually prophesied that he would either be a great spiritual teacher or a great ruler, a great king. So his father had a big preference. His father wanted him to be a great ruler and a great king. So he thought, well, the less he's exposed to suffering, the more likely he'll just follow the ruling path and become a king. So he got the whole palace in on not exposing this child and boy, and then subsequent young man to suffering. So they literally didn't let him see anybody who was ill, anybody who was old and infirm, or certainly not a dead person or a corpse. And he was protected, and he lived the life of luxury. Of course, he was, in a palace, and this went on until age 29, which I thought, wow, this is kind of late. 29, he started sneaking out of the palace. I think I would have tried it a little earlier, but anyway. So he started sneaking out of the palace, and and for 4 days in a row, apparently, so the story goes. And the first day he did see a sick person, and the second day he saw an elderly, infirm individual, and the third day he saw a corpse. And of course, he was very, very distressed about this. He didn't know this kind of thing, was happening. And the fourth day he went out, he met a spiritual seeker, a spiritual person who was also interested in trying to figure out how do you deal with suffering. And so that led Siddhartha Gautama to just leave home and go on a quest to find, what's the cause, why is there suffering and what can you do about it? So he literally left without telling anybody. He just up and left. And he spent the next 6 years wandering about different areas, studying with different spiritual types of teachers. And I think at least a couple of them were probably yogis, but then there were some other, I don't know what the traditions were, but mostly they were very kind of rigid and aesthetic type of traditions, like lots of fasting, lots of self-deprivation. And so that went on for 6 years, and he one day was wandering by a farm, and a young woman came out and offered him some milk and some food. And he was half starved. I mean, he was always half starved in these practices he was engaged in. So he decided to go ahead and take the milk and take the food, and he felt a lot better. And he thought, gee, maybe this isn't the way to go. I have this austere deprivational path that I've been on hasn't gotten me any closer to discovering the cause of suffering or anything to do about it. So and he also didn't think that the lap of luxury in the palace would that certainly hadn't brought him any closer to it either. So he wasn't quite sure what to do. So he walked on from the farm, and he got to a tree, and this tree's subsequently been called the Bodhi tree, or the tree of wisdom. But at the time it was just a tree. He said, I'm going to sit under this tree in meditation until I figure this out, or until I can grapple with this suffering. I don't know what's going on. So he did. He sat under the tree. The story has it, 7 days, 7 nights. And then the morning of the 8th day, he opened his eyes, and the morning star, Venus, was on the horizon, and he was one with the star. The star was one with him. He was one with everything that was arising. Everything that was arising was one with him. What he could see, the cosmos beyond, everything he could and couldn't see, he was one with. And anyway, it was a very profound experience for him. And he thought, wow, what do I do with this? So he didn't know what to do at first. So he sat back down under the tree, and he apparently sat another 49 days contemplating, what happened. And then at the end of 49 days, he was ready to teach. He came up with some basic teachings, and the first one, or probably the most basic, and you all may have heard of it, the Four Noble Truths was, I think, one of his very first teachings. And the first noble truth is basically life is suffering, or life contains a lot of suffering. And the second noble truth is there's a cause for suffering. And what he discovered was the cause for suffering is not liking things the way they are. So clinging to your ideas, your beliefs, or the way you think things should be causes suffering. Basically not liking what is. So you either have something or someone you don't want, or you want someone or something you don't have. I mean, it kind of boils down to just things aren't okay or perfect just the way they are. So that's the second. And then the third noble truth is there's freedom from the cause of suffering. And that was the enlightenment experience he had. As you're one with the cosmos, one with everything, there's nobody to disagree with. There's nobody that's not connected. You're not going to, your right hand isn't going to beat up your left hand. Your liver isn't going to attack your heart for getting more attention. There's no duality. There's no this or that, me or them. It's all, so there's no conflict, and that's freedom from suffering. And so the fourth noble truth is that there's a path to the freedom from suffering. And I had to actually write these down. So the fourth noble truth consists of the eightfold path. And I can see now I only wrote down 7 of the 8, but because I don't have them memorized. But so it's right view, right effort, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right concentration. You kind of get the idea. And it's really a support. It's kind of like a moral codes of conduct for the students that the Buddha was going to be teaching. It's, like this monastic setting with all these people living together. So, how to make things more harmonious, this helps with that. And then also to support the individual on their path as they discover who they truly are. So it's a little bit of a fake out to say, you might think, oh, if I just follow this path, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oh, I'm going to become enlightened. It's more a support as you come to realize who you already are. And that's the trick. You can't become enlightened because you're already, it's already present. That state that the Buddha experienced is absolutely 100% already present in everybody. Everybody has Buddha mind, Buddha awareness. Everything's complete, perfect, and whole, just as it is. There's nothing missing. There's nothing that needs to be added, but we're not aware of it because we have all this layering of conditioning, so it's hard to see. So as the practitioner, the student is going along on their path, there's certain supports. So the Eightfold Path is one of those types of supports. And then there's other practices that can support you and direct you. So a Zen teacher, nobody can make you enlightened, only you can recognize it. And even the Buddha said, don't take my word for it, discover this for yourself. It's like, don't just take my word for it, you have to discover it for yourself. So, so there's techniques, so there's upayas, skillful means to kind of help the practitioner get there. And I bring that up now because there was one that reminded me, I thought of one that kind of goes along with what I just said, and it's a koan. So that's one of these skillful means. Koans are kind of like little stories or vignettes. They're usually from long ago, like in ancient Japan or China, and it's usually like an interaction between a student and his teacher, a monk and a Zen master, that type of thing. And there's something, and they point to something that you can't get at with your intellect or your thinking mind. So what happens is they assign you a koan, my teacher has 700 that you have to do. I mean, this is harder than anything you can ever imagine, harder than any medical school or interventional cardiology, all that stuff, because you can't use your tool that you're most familiar with, So anyway, they assign a koan to a student, and then you sit with it in meditation. And what happens is your mind wrestles with it. Of course, you're trying to think your way through it. And then when you think you have the answer, usually what happens, you exhaust it. And then the answer can come from a deeper place. And then you have to actually present that thing to your teacher in a private interview. And it's like, it could be a physical presentation or it could be a verbal presentation. It's never an explanation. If you think you have a logic or an explanation, don't even bother. That's not it. So anyway, there's a koan that I thought of when I was talking about this complete, whole, and perfect, and the experience. And this one's between a monk and his teacher, Zen master. And so this was a monk that's sitting in meditation, probably in the monastery there. And, he's sitting cross-legged at that time on the floor, meditating. And his teacher comes up and says, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm meditating." And he goes, "I'm a monk, I'm meditating, that's what I do." "Well, why are you doing that?" And he goes, "Well, to become a Buddha." And the teacher said, "Okay, all right." So he walked away, and the guy's sitting there, and then he hears, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he sees his teacher came up and is sitting next to him, and he's rubbing two tiles together. And the monk asks his teacher, he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm rubbing two tiles together." And he said, "Well, why are you doing that?" He said, "Because I want to make a mirror." And the monk said, "You can rub those tiles together forever and it'll never become a mirror." And the teacher turns to him and looks at him and said, "You can sit in meditation forever and you'll never become a Buddha." So does anybody get it? If anybody wants to say, it's not going to be the official presentation, but I'm happy to say what the point is, but there's a point to that. You can't become a Buddha because you already are. You're already a Buddha. It's not something about becoming, it's something about realizing. So that was a teaching from the teacher to the student about that point. And, whether or not, sometimes they say, and then the student was greatly enlightened. This isn't one of the ones that they said. That happens all the time. Anyway, so those are some things that I felt like I could talk about. And then I thought maybe something that isn't beyond words and letters is how did Zen get over here? I mean, where did it come from and how did it get over here? So I kind of said already 2,500 years ago, the Buddha had all these teachings, and he had a large following, and he started teaching at age 35. So he wandered around from 29 for 6 years. I started teaching at age 35, and he lived to 80. So he had a long run. He had a pretty long teaching run. And as he was nearing the time, when he thought, I probably don't have that much longer, he picked a successor. So he had a main student named Mahakashapa, who he, what you call, transmitted the Dharma to, or he made him his primary successor. So he became the main teacher when the Buddha passed on. So in Zen and other traditions, you would consider Mahakashapa as the first patriarch, or the first lineage holder, or the first successor, whatever term you want to use. Patriarch's got a bad rap, but it just means first successor after the Buddha. And then Mahakashapa transmitted it to a guy named Ananda. And I'm not going to go through the whole lineage, don't worry. But I wanted to talk about Ananda because he was pretty important, because he actually also had studied with the Buddha for a couple of decades. He started out super young, and so then when Mahakashapa became his teacher after the Buddha's death, he was able to provide a great service. So the Buddha it was oral tradition, didn't want anything written down, because that's not the point. The point isn't what I say. He had beautiful sutras, beautiful teachings, but no, this isn't about what I'm saying, and it's not about writing it down, it's about realizing it. So nobody wrote it down, but once he died, Ananda, who happened to have a photographic memory and had also heard the teachings hundreds and hundreds of times, was able to write everything down. So we actually have accurate record of the actual teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I mean, it doesn't get written down right away, and it's kind of oral. You're playing telephone for a few centuries, and who knows what you end up with. So the teachings, we're lucky that we have what we feel is pretty much from the horse's mouth. So anyway, so Ananda was the second, and I won't go through. 28th patriarch I'll jump to. His name was Bodhidharma. this is all still in India, and he was a real fierce, weird character. Meditated all the time. Even the rumor goes, or the story has it, he cut off his eyelids so that he couldn't fall asleep. He didn't want to ever fall asleep. He just wanted to be meditating all the time. And then his reputation always also said that he sat facing a wall for 9 years in meditation. And, I assume he got up to pee and eat, but, but that's all he did, other than that, but eventually he decided to teach. And so he went from India to China. So he's the first guy who brought the teachings to China. And then it kind of became mixed with Tao and was called Chan or Chan, I don't know, C-H-A-N, I'm not sure how you would pronounce that. So Zen in Chinese is Chan. And then the teaching, and Bodhidharma was in the 400s. So the teaching went on in China for quite some time until the 1200s. A young man from Japan named Dogen went to, he was a kind of a spiritual genius. I mean, he was just very, very realized for a very young person. In fact, he ran out of teachers that he felt could offer him anything in Japan. So he heard of this Chan in China. So he went to China and he actually interviewed teachers, and he had to find one that he felt, okay, this guy is more realized and is deeper than I am, and I can learn from him. So he found a teacher, Yogan or Yozen, I think. So he stayed and studied with him, and then he brought the teaching back to Japan, Dogen did, from China to Japan. Then it was called Zen, and then we'll jump ahead to early last century. It came from Japan to the West Coast, to California. And I don't know if you've heard of any of these. Suzuki Roshi is somebody that you may or may not have heard of, and Yasutani Roshi, and my teacher's teacher, Maizumi Roshi, was a guy that came from Japan to Los Angeles. I think I had to look it up. It said like the late 1950s, and he was pretty young when he came over. And my teacher met him in the early 1970s. And so Maizumi Roshi would have been the 80th patriarch after the Buddha, and my teacher is the 81st patriarch. Oh, fun fact about Maizumi Roshi, I almost forgot. He's the prototype for Yoda in Star Wars. And that was pretty cool. So that's my lineage. Anyway, so my teacher's the 81st patriarch. His name is Genpo Roshi. He's an American guy. His real name's Dennis Merzel, or his given name. Genpo's a Dharma name. And if I would become a teacher at some point, I would be an 82nd patriarch. So it kind of goes along like that. So I guess that's all I wanted to say. How did it get here? And just let's see, I did this so I wouldn't get too lost. So maybe just a couple other words about skillful means, because we're going to do one of them here shortly, and that's the meditation. But big mind, as I mentioned, the big mind process is a tool that can be used to kind of explore that territory, and we're going to discover more about that next Sunday. So it ought to be fun. It's kind of fun, and if nothing else, it ought to be fun and informative, and it's easy to do. It's all on me. It's not on anybody else. It's all about me facilitating what is. So we'll see. Anyway, so that one's coming. The second one was the koans I already talked about. Those little vignettes that drive you like crazy. They're short to begin with. I'm on ones now that are really long, and then they have about 5 or 6 different points that you have to be able to present. So it's, it gets more complicated. But some of the early ones that you give students are things like, how do you stop the sound of a distant temple bell? So, you're going to think, your mind's going to, take the clacker off, or, put some soundproof thing, and, none of that stuff, that's all rational, so you have to work through that until you can drop it, and then the answer will come up, and then you present it in private interview with your teacher, and you either get it or you don't. If you don't, you go sit with it some more and until you do get it. And another one would be, show me your face before your parents were born. You know, that's one. You know, what does that mean? You know, the other, like a monk asked Master Joshu once, what is Buddha? And he said, the oak tree in the garden. So you get to sit with that. What's the answer to that? How do you present that to the Zen master? And then probably the most famous early one is the one where a monk asked Joshu, Master Joshu, does a dog have a Buddha nature? And Joshu said, mu, M-U, mu. That's the Japanese word that means non. It doesn't mean no. It doesn't mean not. It means non. So then the question for the student is, what is mu? So here you're given this thing. Does a dog have a Buddha nature? Mu, M-U. What is mu? So the student has to sit with that in meditation. That's a tough one, and it's an early tough one, and people can sit with that for months and years. I've met a woman in one of the workshop once, she'd been on that one for 20 years. I mean, never recognized it, never got it. So anyway, they're fun, interesting, and frustrating, and you know, all that. And then the third major teaching tool is meditation, and that's what we're going to go to next. And in Zen, it's called Zazen. That just means sitting meditation. And we're going to do it in a very, hopefully, relaxed and comfortable way. Like back in the day, like when my teacher was learning, you know, you used to have to sit in these really pretzeled up postures, you know, like the full lotus or half lotus, or if nothing else, like even when I started, we sat on the floor with a zabuton and zafu, you know, sitting cross-legged on the floor. And then there was all this instruction about rigid posture, and you know, you had to do this and that. And when my teacher, you know, was a student, they still came around in the Zendo, they'd have a guy with a stick. And if your posture sucked, they'd hit you with a stick. Or if you fell asleep, they'd hit you with a stick. They don't do that anymore. I got out of that one. It was gone by the time I started studying. But anyway, my teacher had a lot of injuries from all that kind of difficult sitting, hours and hours and hours. I mean, they would sit a lot. And so he had a lot of like back pain and neck pain and shoulder pain. And actually my teacher's 80 now. So about 15 years ago, he decided, he found a new way to sit, and it's a lot more comfortable and relaxed. And he said he's never had deeper meditation than sitting this way, because, you know, you're not fighting your body and your pain and all this stuff going on. So that's what I'm going to teach you, this very basic meditation. And it's in a chair. So, you know, we don't have to sit on the floor anymore. If anybody's interested in that, someday I could show you that, but no. So he sits in a chair. So we're going to talk about what to do with the body and the mind and the breath. And feet should be just flat on the floor. So, you know, not crossed, legs not crossed, just flat on the floor. And your back should be just lightly supported, you know, not like that, but, you know, in a dignified posture, but not rigid. Just, you know, have your back lightly supported so that it's comfortable. And then your hands, you know, this is the posture I was taught, and I use it. It's called the cosmic mudra. We don't have to do that, but unless somebody wants to learn it, you can. For me, it's comfortable because you can still rest it, but the way he teaches it now, and what I'll say, is just putting your hands on the top of your thighs, you know. You got your feet on the ground, your back supported, your hands are on the top of your thighs, and then, you know, what to do with your eyes. So there's two choices, and maybe today we'll just close our eyes. That's what I prefer anyway. The other is to, just because of the seating arrangements, you can pick a spot like, say, 3 feet in front of you on the ground. I don't know if we even have that much room, but, and you can just like focus on the spot with a soft gaze, you know, kind of blurs out. The point is not to be looking at anything in particular, but it's just a place to land your eyes. I tried that when I started. I used to wear contacts all the time, so I felt like my contacts would be drying. I mean, you're allowed to blink and stuff when you're sitting, but I felt like I was so distracting, just the blinking and the dry. So I thought, oh, heck with that. I'm just gonna do it with my eyes closed. So eyes closed, hands here, and then eventually, you know, when we start counting the breaths, you know, your mouth will just be closed, and they usually say just put your tongue on the palate behind your teeth, you know, with your mouth closed. You can see what that feels like. You know, if that's not comfortable, it doesn't really matter that much. But, you know, that ended up surprisingly, I thought, feeling pretty comfortable when I closed my mouth to just have my tongue there. And then it's like what to do with your mind. So I don't know how many people meditate, but when you close your eyes and just tell your mind, stop thinking, you know, what's going to happen? I mean, I don't know if anybody's, you've heard of monkey mind, you know, it's just like, oh my God, all that, and that's normal. That's what your mind does. Your mind secretes thoughts. That's absolutely 100% normal. The thing is not to make it wrong. You know, your mind just does that. But what we're going to do is give it something to do, something to focus on or concentrate on. So, and it's a training process. So what we're going to be focusing on is counting the breath, and I'll talk about that more. But you know, we want to give it something to do so things can settle. So aside from monkey mind, the analogy I like is like your mind is like a big ball jar full of muddy water, and it's all shook up, and there's twigs and sticks and pebbles and all this debris floating around. And you set it down, it's all just swirling around. But over time, as you learn to focus, that starts to settle out, and eventually it'll clear up, and you know, it'll settle down at the bottom, and the water will be clear. Now that takes time, you know, that can take months, even years, but you know, you got to start somewhere. So, you know, when you start, the thing is not to make any sitting wrong. The only wrong sitting you can have is if you judge it to be wrong, because there's nothing wrong with anything that happens while you're sitting. So what we're going to do is give our mind something to focus on. And what I'm going to start with is just 3 deep exhales with our mouth open. So I'm going to just to rid your body of tension. So breathing in through your nose, go. Okay, and now that, you know, we've kind of just had the intention to let things flow out, then we're just going to close our mouth, and the counting is going to be 1 in through your nose, 2 out through your nose, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you're going to do that up to 10. And don't force your breathing. I was doing it so maybe you could hear what I was doing, but just let your breath, whatever is natural, whatever rhythm is natural, you don't have to force it to do anything. But you're going to count out 1, out 1, in 2, until you get to 10, and then you're just going to start over. Go back to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, get to 10, and then start over, and then do it, and then start over. And what you're going to notice is, along with a line somewhere, you're going to be thinking about stuff like, oh, I got to stop to the grocery after this class, and oh, I got to get this and that, and oh, what's for dinner? It's like, oh, darn it! It's like, well, that's okay. Don't get upset about it. Just start back at 1. Oh, I noticed it. Good. I noticed I was off in my head. Let's go back to 1. 1 through 10. 1 through 10. 1 through 10. The other thing that'll happen is 19, 20. 21, 22, you know, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, that's too high. Let's go back to 1. So So I think maybe we're ready to see how that goes, like just 1 through 10. Does everybody understand the instructions? Pretty darn basic and simple. And I thought what I'd do is, just for a few minutes, I thought I'd set a timer. How many minutes do you think? 4 or 5?
30.
No. I'm thinking 4 or 5 minutes is all. How about, let me see, my timer. So what do you think, Dan? 4 or 5?
4.
Okay, we'll do 4.
Kamie, I have a question.
Yeah.
Was 3 a pause? I did 1 in, out, and was
No, just in,
in and out.
out,
Okay,
in, out.
Okay.
Yeah, just in and out, no pause.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a pause, but you don't have to number it or anything, you're just counting the inhales and the exhales, inhales and exhales, so super simple.
I can do that.
And the reason it trains the mind too, it keeps you right here in the present when you're actually doing it, because you can't breathe in the past and you can't breathe in the future. You have to breathe, you're present right here as if you're focused on your breath. So it helps. And then the other thing I'd like to say about meditation is once you get used to it, you have to practice it. It's kind of like coming home, and maybe I'll talk about that more later. Why don't we just give it a shot? We'll try 4 minutes and see what happens. And so, okay, I'll invite you to go ahead and close your eyes and then just in and out at your own speed. Okay. So how did that go? Anybody want to say how it was for him?
Weird.
Weird? Yeah?
I hear two clocks.
Oh, yeah.
One here, one there.
That brings you right into the present. You're aware of,
Yeah.
yeah.
I could block all that off. All I kept doing was relaxing, like I kept getting deeper into my chair.
Okay, that's good.
No thoughts. I had no thoughts other than my breathing.
Okay, nice.
I had thoughts that kept wanting to come in.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, it's amazing how if you get back to the counting,
Yeah,
that does go away.
yeah. Or you can even watch them float by without grabbing one and then acting, oh, yeah, and then I have to do planning and, yeah, and then, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
I was surprised how quickly the 4 minutes went by.
Me too.
Good.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, I wasn't sure how long, sometimes it can be excruciating. Depending on what your mind's doing, but, again, if you don't make it wrong, whatever your mind does, your mind's just doing, and, so sitting at home, maybe you can start with more than 5 minutes, sometimes I say just try 5 minutes and kind of get used to that, and then you can gradually increase it to, whatever is right for you. I mean, there's no specific time that you have to do it. I mean, usually, spiritual practice, say 20 or 30 minutes, maybe, that would be a good amount of time to work towards. But, my teacher sits for hours a day, and other people, can sit for, for hours if you want to. I forgot to say a couple things. So one is, your head position. I didn't mention it. I think everybody was fine, but it's not an arrogant position where your head's up like this. It's kind of just, and maybe if anything, your chin slightly tilted, and it has the good benefit of if you do fall asleep, your head goes down rather than back, because that'll happen too. You can fall asleep, which means you have achieved deep relaxation. If you fall asleep, again, there's nothing wrong with that, So, so I would encourage, trying it at home, and, maybe if you're really comfortable with 5 minutes, go 10 and see what happens, and, gradually increase it to what's appropriate. It's good for, not just good for spiritual training and staying in the present. There's been lots of studies as a physician, there's lots of studies showing the benefit of meditation for general well-being and improvement in various conditions, and et cetera. You just Google that, and there's all kinds of things that, they've studied that have been beneficial. In Zen, we say there's 5 reasons to meditate, 5 plus 1. 5, the first reason most people start is to feel better. They want to, get a handle on, this anxiety and monkey mind and rushing thoughts, and, just for your own personal well-being. And then the second is to develop samadhi, which is basically just concentration power, to really go into that deep, concentrated state, be able to concentrate deeply. And then the third reason is, to assist with enlightenment, to assist you on your journey towards enlightenment. And then the fourth reason is for the benefit of others, sitting for the benefit of other beings and, the earth, or whatever, you want to sit for, dedicating your sitting for others. And then the fifth reason is for no reason, and that's called shikantaza, which means, I said repeat. Oh, that's what happened. No, that was 4 minutes. No, shikantaza is sitting without an aim or a goal. So it's just sitting. So, it's basically just sit. You're not even counting your breaths. Thoughts are quiet. That's after, usually you have some sitting experience before you get to that point. And then the sixth reason is all of the above. You said for all of those reasons. So, what else was I going to say? Sitting at home. It's been really beneficial to me, and I think Dan and my teacher teaches us all the time. When you wake up at night and you can't go back to sleep, sitting is a good thing to do. You may as well get up out of bed and relax and count your breaths. Like I said, I can sometimes fall into just shikantaza, just sitting. But there's times my mind is also racing. I wake up at night and then a thought grabs you and you can't go back to sleep. And it's like, so then I go get on the couch we have a little sitting area in the room and I just sit there and I actually I count my breaths. I mean, I've been meditating over 20 years and I go back to counting the breath because it's very soothing and it brings you back and centers you. And in a way you can say, you're coming home. I mean, I feel like I carry this with me everywhere I go, no matter where I am in the world. I have this at my, I can sit anywhere. You can sit on a plane. That's another good place to, to sit. Or, any country I'm visiting or any house, you're taking your sanctuary with you. You're taking your quiet, place with you. So that's another way to look at it. And I think that's all. Do you have any comments?
One question that just occurs to me, is there a difference between sitting an open, endless sitting versus setting the timer for 4 minutes or 15? Or are there benefits to either one or downsides?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, if you're in a Zen session or something like that, you might be sitting for some hours. I guess that's kind of timed though. I guess it's kind of timed, but no, I mean, I think you've experienced that yourself in the middle of the night when you just get up, you don't know how long you're going to be up. Mm-hmm. And when I get up, I don't know how long I'm going to feel like I want to sit until I start to feel like, oh, I think I'm getting a little sleepy. I think I can go back and lay down now. So no, if I set a timer then I think that would be, that wouldn't be beneficial. But if you have just limited amount of time and you want to fit it into your schedule, just to make sure that you do it, I think, a timer is good too. I don't think there's probably any dramatic benefit one versus another, in my opinion, I guess.
Kamie, how come if you wake up in the middle of the night, which I'm sure we all have done that, why can't I just count my breaths and lay there so if I fall asleep, I'm where I want to be?
You can. I do that sometimes. I do it you can do that. I think if you're close to sleep already anyway, that's probably, you may as well do that.
If you're not even close to sleep.
If you're not close to sleep, I think it, for me personally, I find it better to get up out of bed. The other thing you can do, my teacher says he sits a lot at night because he he just doesn't sleep. But he sits up in bed, even though the posture is maybe not as good as the feet on the floor. Your feet out, and you kind of put up the pillow. If you don't want to get up in your room for some reason, maybe it's cold in there, and you just don't want to get out of bed. But I think for me, I feel more benefit. I don't know if that's even the right word, to just get up out of bed and just be consciously attending to just that, Yeah, but I don't think anything's wrong. Yeah.
The repair that our body gets from sleep, or the benefits from sleep, is that similar? Like, how does that compare?
That's a great question. That's a super good question. That hasn't been studied, I don't think. My teacher wears one of these devices that tells how deep of sleep you get, because he doesn't sleep very well, so he likes to know when he does sleep, how deep is it. He's discovered that, this guy will literally sit for some hours, and he said he's not asleep, and he records the deepest sleep during some of those sits. So I feel like that's probably got to be beneficial if you're actually sitting in meditation, like say you have insomnia, so you choose that. Is that as beneficial as sleep? It's just not been studied, so I don't know. I don't really know the answer. Of course, probably not that many people, sit that long. And as far as I know, that's not been studied. But it makes me wonder, because of my teacher's device, like it's like showing that I have the deepest sleep when I'm actually sitting. And I thought, well, sounds like probably good. Because as a physician, I'm like, what do you mean you have insomnia? You can't sleep? That's restored, you know. And then it's like, well, no. And I'm like, no, I don't know everything. You know, maybe don't even know much, you know. So it's a great question, though. I suspect that it's got some benefits. Is it as good as sleep? I don't
Well, I
know.
assume people with breathing issues or reflux or different things that wake people when they're
Mhm.
sleeping that might not be, or that happen because you lay down.
Mhm, mhm.
Might, I don't know.
Well, it definitely helps with the reflux. Like if I eat too late at night, that's happened to me before. And that's a good time to sit. Like, okay, that's annoying. I'm gonna just sit up and then it goes away and then I wake back down. That's actually happened, but, yeah. Any other questions? Anybody interested in, if anybody's interested, did you get a clipboard? No. If anybody's interested in like sitting together occasionally, I'd be willing to, I was thinking maybe even like, I think maybe, I don't know, this isn't set in stone if people give me feedback. But I was thinking maybe Thursday mornings, 9:30 to 10:30, not sitting the whole time, but maybe some instruction, maybe 20 minutes of sitting and then maybe some talk afterwards if appropriate. I was thinking maybe the second and fourth Thursday, so as not to interfere with book club on the third Thursday, but second and fourth Thursdays, like 9:30 to 10:30, down in like the youth room with all the comfy couches and furniture and stuff. And if anybody's interested, Dan's gonna get a clipboard and a piece of paper. If you want to put your name and email, if I do that, I can notify you. I would also probably try and get it just in the church bulletin that there would be meditation this morning at this time, you know, in the bulletin too. So I'll put it probably multiple places, but if anybody's interested, I'm also happy to say, oh, okay, we're gonna, you know, start doing this. I was thinking maybe start in February sometime. And if you're in, and sitting together is different than sitting by yourself. So there's a like a group samadhi or a group energy. It can be very powerful to sit with other people. So you know, it's a different experience, and it's nice. So if anybody's interested in that, there's a clipboard there. You can put your name and email address if you want to. Otherwise, I would probably put it in a bulletin anyway. And, yeah.
Where did the image of the Buddha that we all are familiar with, where did that come from? Is that based on anyone or is that?
Well, gosh, I don't know which, I'm not sure which image because there's so many.
I'm thinking of like just the big.
The big belly.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the actual Buddha wasn't the big belly, so I'm not sure. I think he actually was fairly physically fit and attractive, but I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm not sure where the iconic big belly Buddha comes from. Other than, you know, I didn't actually mention that too. Like when you do breathe, it's okay to let your belly expand. You know, like people like hold it. Yeah, it's kind of it may be automatic, but it's a deeper breath. So you know, let your belly expand with your inhale and then let it out. So maybe that's it, the Buddha breathing in his, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Don't know. Anything else? Anybody want to sit some mornings? Maybe? Yeah. Okay. Good. That'd be cool. I mean, it would be great. It's really nice to sit with people, you know, and it's laid back.
Yeah, I do actually a Zoom sit
Mhm.
once a week
Oh, do you? Okay.
and started out through a small church group in
Yeah.
Arizona, but now since then we've all moved. We're all in different states.
Yeah. Well, we do Zoom sitting with our group sometimes too, because my teacher's pretty much, our Sangha is virtual at this point, so he doesn't really have a temple. He spends most of his time in Hawaii, and him and his wife have a house in Oregon, but he likes Hawaii. He rents a place. And I see him there. I mean, he does workshops and retreats in different locations, so I'll go see him there. And I've been to Hawaii a bunch of times to see him, but But yeah, Zoom, we do a lot of Zoom. I probably won't do that because it'll be down in the youth room, and I figure if you can't come, it's fine if you can. You know, just even if it's, me and Dan will probably show up. If one other person shows up, that makes a nice little group of 3. It'll be fine. So it doesn't have to be big. But if y'all want to show up. Okay, well, thanks,
Thanks.
you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm delighted at the turnout. I was like, wow. And hopefully you'll come next week too. See? Yeah.
Kamie, do you know what's that? Lisa Carroll is.
Yeah.
Oh, good. She would like her.